Happens every time. I have 2 different things going here, so one of them is there we go. Alright, so we are live. Let me see if I can change this to, let's see, privacy. It always says that I'm only let's see. Alright. Sorry, just checking on one thing. Always doing that, just checking on one thing. Let's see. Oh, low, the speaker just All right. All right, we should turn that one off. Okay. I've never know whether okay, so it's just really crazy. I'm actually going from my phone onto my profile, trying to figure out how to I have a page called Wake Up Doc Scott, and it's the 501c3 page. So I'm trying to get it to go to that, and I'm doing it through Riverside FM. If anybody um knows what any of that is about, then you'll be elated. If you don't, then you'd be like, what is he talking about? It's this thing of trying to figure out how every platform needs to work so you can be on it and do the thing you want to do. And there's always just a little few extra things to figure out. So it kind of brought me to the topic for today, which is basically, I called it anchored in stillness, but rising in the shaking. Isn't that kind of fun? See? So it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. If you haven't been sniffing yours all day, I mean, if you have a nose like mine, you can smell it a mile away. Hallelujah. It seems like everywhere that I look, there is disruption. Everything just feels like it's chaotic and in disruption. Sometimes disruption is good, sometimes it's bad, and sometimes there's both. And I think there's both, right? So we're living in a day where you turn on the news. Well, I guess it depends on what channel. But if you turn on the news, where I turn on the news, you see a lot of disruption happening and things just happening really good. Like there's something new every single day going on, that President Trump is doing. It's like things are just shaking, there's just a lot happening. And so it's been a very tumultuous time. And like I said, I've said this a lot before, but like tumult isn't necessarily bad. Kairos moments are heavenly moments that kind of intersect Chronos. The Chronos is that incremental time. And I think we were talking last time a lot about how incremental time moves us along a continuum slowly, but very deliberately. And then we end up in a place where we're like, how did we get here? And there's a diabolic agenda beyond in all of it. Incremental time to move us in ways that change the culture and change the atmosphere, change the landscape in ways that make other things more easily introduced or brought about. We talked about the whole C word the other day, the COVID word, and what that did. And I called that the grand disorientation. And of course, the enemy was the author of that one. But I remember one time talking to my wife, we were I remember, I would do this surreal kind of stunned thing. And I was saying this the other day too, so I won't hang on this, but it was just this idea that how did we shut everything down in a day? And so I'd have this moment where I'd be like, how did like this is crazy. Like, how did this happen? Like, what was, it didn't make any sense. It was so disorienting. It was so discombobulating, which was part of the actual agenda, right? if you have a people who are disoriented, fighting with each other, agitated, to the nth degree. I remember how bad it was for students. It was like we never really got them back. I remember the year that the ones that went through the whole C word during their junior, senior year and or their freshman, sophomore year, sorry, when they came to graduate, it was like, you were pulling teeth to get assignments. There was this huge lack of motivation. Um, just kind of just pulled the rug out from under them in a way that I don't think that they really recovered from it. And and of course, I don't think that we're done looking at the impact of all of those things. Um, we're going to have mental health studies for a long time. Um, about what happened and about what it's done to people, but it's all trauma. Okay, so it's trauma, and the enemy loves to ride in on the coattails of trauma. I mean, regardless of what kind of trauma we're talking about, the enemy loves trauma because it disrupts, because it tries to destroy things, it tries to shake our identity, it tries to do things to us to basically make us unrecognizable in terms of our who we are, what we're here for, what we're actually the blueprint of heaven. If he can wreck that one, if you will, then he will. And that's kind of what he does through a lot of the things that bring great disorientation. He loves to leave a wake of confusion. And so when there's a lot going on, it just feels in the atmosphere, and you guys can tell me whether you're feeling it too or not, but it's like you feel the disruption. I remember one time I saw this thing where it was like the tectonic plates of the earth were shifting, that God was going to do something that was so significant that it was going to send ripples through the earth, like the plates were shifting. And that essentially part of what he was going to do was it was this whole thing of raising up a righteous standard. We had been living in the lawless parade for a while, and it was like, but there were things that God was going to do that could not be stopped. And when he did them, it was going to shake the entire earth. I mean, it was going to shake it, like shake the earth, like in a significant way. And there was also this sense, because for years I had prophesied suddenlies, and I would loved this particular verse in it did not go to Hebrews. I'm trying to go to Amos 9. Sorry. This thing did not listen to me when I was doing a search. Naughty little I don't even know what to call it. Naughty little internet. All right, where is the message? Okay, there we go. Um I just felt like that the shaking was gonna be so significant that it was gonna part of what God was doing was he was taking down giants, okay? And so one time I had this picture, in kind of conjunction with those tectonic plates was there were giants that were strewn all over the land. You'd go to the gas station, there'd be a giant there, and laying on the ground. You go to Walmart, there would be a giant on the ground. And essentially, what he was saying was, I'm toppling the systems of the world. The things, the governments of this world, the systems, everything is a system. Okay. And so these giants were being slain everywhere. And it was like when he did this, it was going to create this ripple of um like a wave through the earth because justice was going to be released in the earth in a way, and some of the things that had the biggest some of these strongholds were all connected, if that makes sense. And so a lot of people at 2020, I remember, they were waiting on breakthrough. 2020 was supposed to be this year of promise. It was like, the prophetic, every this is going to be the big year of great change, yada yada yada. There was a lot of excitement about 2020, and then suddenly we got whammo hit, which is part of what I think for believers made it so disorienting because we had this anticipation. Hey, if Evie, how you doing? We had this anticipation that things were going to be so like mind blowing, and part of me wants to say, well, they were. it came a different way. Jesus didn't orchestrate the whole COVID thing, but what he did do, I remember hearing him. I remember one time I just heard him chuckling and he said, "You have no idea, Scott, you have no idea what I've done, what I'm preparing and all of this, what I'm going to do on the heels of the grand disorientation is a reorientation that's going to reorient so much to righteousness." And so that we were going to see this huge, huge shift in the land. And that's where those tectonic plates and those giants that were on the ground, come into play. Because so many, I think a lot of the one way to look at it is it's like this thing is like a Leviathan, okay? And when the enemy is, I mean, when Jesus is doing some things that cannot be undone, when he is going after, this is a season where he's doing the warfare for us. We're not the ones beating the gates down. He's actually moving things on our behalf, things that have kept things stuck. And so, a lot of breakthroughs, if you take out the dragon, I'm using a metaphor here, and the dragon has things like tentacles in every arena of our culture, every mountain of culture. This thing is like the, Medusa, it's got tentacles going everywhere, right? If you take out a couple major dragons, I'm just using those as a metaphor, and these things are like major strongholds, okay? When you take them out, everything that is attached to them goes out too. Does that make sense? In other words, if you look at all of the things that were going on in the lawless parade, violence, places being burned to the ground, a lot of racial hatred. I mean, we spent the bulk of our supernatural school ministry at the church we were at processing and going through all the racial stuff at that time, all the things that were happening in our own little town. We had a mod, in Brunswick, Georgia. We had, I mean, it was all just going crazy. And so we were processing so much of that during a lot of that time. Like we spent a lot of time just sitting around, recognizing that people just needed to tell their story, tell what they were thinking, how they were feeling about it, and just kind of process it. And we did. I mean, it was phenomenal. It was like a place to do that. But when you look at like all of the tentacles, if you look at the things that were happening, you had disease, you had lockdown, you had everything, every kind of restraint. You had people being deplatformed, de everything during that time. If you came out against it, you were, if you said anything. I remember talking to this teacher in the teacher lounge. This is a woman who had her educational doctorate. So I'm like, so I couldn't help myself. It was like I just had to like say one little thing. And I said, so I think we're talking about mask. I said, so do you ever like look at the research about any of these things, about, the vaccines, about the mask, about these, things you couldn't say? And she said, yes, I look at everything the CDC puts out. And I thought, okay, woman, you are, I didn't, wasn't being mean, but I'm thinking in my head, girl, you have been trained to be a researcher. We're living in the age where if you don't do your own homework, you will be misled by what you hear. This is the era where everybody found all the alt news sources because legacy media wasn't putting out anything. I mean, there were places you could find pockets of things that were true, but a lot of it, wasn't. It was just disinformation and lies and etc. And so the enemy got a lot out of that. And so you found ways to go do your homework. You started researching. I remember my son Rodney. This was one of the times when I realized just how brilliant he was. He showed me a map and it had everything on it. Like it was like everything back to Rockefeller, back to Bohemian Grove, to, I mean, it had everything these major things in our culture that were all part of like deep state things that had been being built incrementally over time, right? There was a plan in place and it was intricate. It involved the families that were really ruling things, the central bank. It involved all of these things. And he would just sit there and he said, "You know what I did, Dad?" He said, "I got on DuckDuckGo and I just picked something on this map." And it was an illustrator. It was like a graphic organizer, and it showed you how all these things are related through time. MK Ultra, if you ever watched, I showed it to all my classes. The primer for opening our eyes for me was Out of the Shadows, the documentary. And that documentary, like, it really was an eye opener because I remember Tucker Carlson saying at one time, "I never knew how diabolic things were." It's like you're going along in life and there's things that are wrong, but you don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes or how wrong it is and how much evil is embedded in it. You didn't think it was malicious. You didn't think, if you were just an ordinary person, you didn't think that it was diabolic, like, orchestrated to the core, like that it was straight up evil. And you just thought that this things were just the way they were because the way they were. And in that documentary, it's an actor, okay? He's actually a stuntman who he wasn't a believer, okay? So he he basically what happened to him was he'd been in all the movies, Batman, he'd been in all of them. He was a stuntman who performed in all of these movies, all the ones that everybody loves, right? And so what he did was he was doing a routine stunt one day and he broke himself. No, he I have verbal faux pas quite often. I just let them roll because they're funny. Right, they're very funny. He broke something in his pelvic region, which, of course, for men and women, controls a lot of functions we want to keep. And so he was working with this pelvic floor therapist. They never showed her face, they only showed her voice, on the screen. And she was a believer and she began to pray for him. And he let her. And so he said, I used to look around Hollywood and I would see things like in symbols, things that they would just put out front in front of you. You know what I mean? And essentially he was like, and I knew that I'd look at that and I think there's something wrong with that, like, satanic symbols, things that would just be out in the open, because that's a lot of what they do. They put it in movies. You see the movie where what's his name is saying MK Ultra. Right. We just watched okay, this is pretty cool. This is like a side note, free. My wife and I just watched the most wonderfully and profoundly made, TV series that I think I've seen and maybe ever. It's called Granite Flats. I know I'm jumping around, but it all comes back together. Remember, we do rabbit trails and we bring them all together at the end, and we'll end with Jabez prayer, and that'll wrap everything up real nicely, neat with a bow. All right, so it's set in the 60s during the time where everybody was a communist and everybody was afraid of communists. And it's set in schools in this little town in Colorado called Granite Flats. And the kids get involved after they see this, what they think is an asteroid or something, which ends up being, something more ominous, landing, going through the sky and landing in their region. And they get together and they start to try to uncover this mystery. So it's a group of kids and it's a group of adults who are involved. You got KGB, you've got, FBI, you've got all of it there, okay? And then there's, everybody's agents and they're doing experiments on our people with MK Ultra. And they were operating under the belief at the time that it was okay to manipulate somebody's brain that was one of our people, which is highly immoral and irregular and not right at all. But they justified it because this greater evil called communism was out there, and we needed to be able to take it down. So we need to learn how to do this, and the only way we could learn how to do this was to do it on our own people. So it examined kind of the ethics and morality around some of the things that they were doing, and it opened up all these questions about it. And it was done by BYU. This is Brigham Young University. So these are Mormons creating this thing. I think it's just incredible. I just like that idea. And so the series is only like 3, 3, what do you call them? Not segments, series, 3, not episodes, but oh my gosh, Scott, seasons. Thank you. I'm taking my medicine right now. I'm taking my medicine, baby. Give me my medicine. I'm at the end of my medicine. Okay, um, so anyway, I mean, it was just incredibly the way that you're looking at the way the dialogue, the way they develop these characters, and they talked a little bit. They did some interviews with some of the people that produced it, and they were like, there's some big names in it. Like there's the guy from Back to the Future. I can't think of his name, but he was the wacky scientist guy, with his hair all blown up. He's in there as a teacher. And they drew some pretty interesting people that are pretty well known that are in it, and they said it was an experiment. They were trying and said this is a kind of an experiment that I'm always interested in. They wanted to do something that was family oriented, right? But they wanted to be able to do something that really delved deeply into something like conspiracy type theory stuff. They wanted to delve into something that hadn't been done before. How do you bring this element of doing something for a family together in a series that is exploring a very serious, topic, but doing it in a real but kind of funny way at the same time. Like it was very real and it was painting a picture for people, and it was phenomenally done. I mean, the dialogue, the characters, I've never seen anything so the mystery, the intrigue, the way things unfolded, the complexity of the plot and the characters that are in it and how complex they were. It was just profound. So I said all that to say because we were talking about MK Ultra in Outer Shadows. And so Out of Shadows explored what basically the CIA did to our own people and whatnot. And this actor, or he was a stuntman, he set up a fake social media account and he began to look at like just exploring things. And they brought in like, Simon LeVay, Satanists. They brought in the different families, that were involved in, like the whole what do you call it, spirit cooking. They showed Abramovich, who is the woman who is the kind of the hallmark picture for adrenochrome, which is where they take the adrenalized blood of babies that are being sacrificed to Satan, and it keeps Hollywood looking really young because they're twisted and evil in that way. And they showed what she did to break down and to mold Lady Gaga. And like she was her little student. And they talked about that all the people at the top in Hollywood were owned. They're owned by somebody, they're being handled. And they showed places where when people got out and started telling the truth when they were being handled, like Jim Carrey, his girlfriend gets killed. You've got Justin Bieber and his song Yummies. It's all about this whole thing with sex, with kids and the whole 9 yards, pedophilia. And they had it there was I forget her name. I keep forgetting a lot of names tonight, but I'm gonna take my medicine right now. She she was a reporter that used to be on one of the liberal media stations like NMN, NBC, whatever. And Joan, I'll think of her name in a second. But essentially, they kept her on because she was such a good journalist, even though she told the truth, right? And until she got to Pizzagate. And so Pizzagate was this whole thing of the whole pedophilia thing that was being revealed in the elite, the Hollywood or, group and whatnot. And she came across like all the emails, like they would talk about having a pizza. And she was like, guys, you know, you could get a massage for an hour, you can get a pedicure, you could go to the spa for an hour, but you don't eat a pizza for an hour. And so when she began to expose pedophilia, she was out. And they showed the clip from the Golden Globe speech with Ricky Gervais. And I mean, he called them all out as being friends of Epstein, about all the pedophile movies, as he said, that came out that year. And he said, you guys, um, basically, we know who you are. You got Tom Hanks over there going, people having these faces and other people laughing really nervously. But he called them out and said, basically, you guys don't have a reason to say anything. When you guys come up here, you need to get your award and go sit the blank down because you don't have a right lecturing anybody on anything. And he would, he's like, I will get this gig again, probably. I got this thing by fax, you know what I mean? Um, so this is my last shot at this. And so we're gonna make jokes. But he called Hollywood out on a lot of their things, and he did it like boldly. And so this thing segues into it's kind of it goes through everything with even with Disney, and I mean there's just so much that it exposed, but it was the first thing that I think I saw where at the end of it you're like, I didn't know how deep and dark this thing was, that there was so much agenda and everything to um basically break us down to nothing, make us a third world country, and kind of um be owned. I mean honestly. And so and then just how diabolic. I mean, it was just crazy. So that was like the primer. It was like the thing that opened people's eyes. I ended up showing it to all my classes. It was like, I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen here? You know what I mean? I mean, knowing that now and knowing what I did probably would have got me in a lot of trouble. But anyway, I just felt like people and kids would watch it and they would be like, you know, they never thought that there was anything behind anything, that they've been training us in television. They've been preparing us for so many things for so many years that were so, you know, even with the virus, like they were preparing us for so many things. We were being molded and shaped by this incremental agenda that was just there all the time, but nobody ever really saw it. And then it just began to blow up, and now it's been blowing up in a really good way. And so we've been living in this place of just watching this lawless parade for years, and people like violence being normalized. I remember there were things that I saw on my Instagram feed that I cannot unsee. Like, and I'm the guy that, like, kids at school, they love to show you the video of the latest fight. What's like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see that. It's so disturbing to me. Like it really makes it does something to me that I just don't like. It's wrong, and it's just mean. And I mean, it just I don't. And I would see things where people would just a store owner would just get his head boxed in, and you find out later that 4 hours later he died in the hospital. He was just trying to protect his store. And so what got unleashed on us was just this wave of lawlessness and violence. And so when I think about what Jesus's response is to that, because it's not like it was missed on him. And we're not done yet. We're way not done. And then you tie that together with where we were at as believers. So many people, like, what the trauma that got introduced in that was like multitude. Like it's like when you introduce something that big into culture, it has its own kind of waves and it creates its own kind of corollary traumas in the culture. But there's also corollary breakthroughs in the culture. So when Jesus comes and he takes out some of these major strongholds that they've been the dragon behind a lot of the things that we've been seeing, it makes room for major shifts to happen because all of those demonic strongholds are connected to other things. And many of our breakthroughs have been kind of held captive, if you will, in some of those places of stronghold. And so when Jesus says, when you realize that he's raising up a righteous standard, that basically arise and shine, for the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. It's like deep darkness covers the people. We've seen that. And so I'm always been the person where my eschatology is very happy and victorious, because it doesn't matter to me how dark anything gets. The light will always be brighter. The unusual miracles and the crazy things, the greater works, the things that have never been seen before. And we began to see, even in the middle of the most lawless time, think about some of the things that happened that were hallmarks of what Jesus was doing. In the middle of lockdowns, you had Sean Foyt, doing Let Us Worship all over the country, basically like in your face. I remember when he was in Chicago, they would utilize their whole police force to make sure they took him down and make sure they dismantled his equipment so that they couldn't set up and do anything. So they ended up walking in the streets and singing. It's like, we're going to not worry about all the crime happening in our city because we want to shut down Sean Foyt and Let Us Worship. It was this wave that was a response to the lawlessness, this wave of righteousness, this thing that was rising up in people. And Sean Foyt really led the way on that one. I mean, and that whole thing came at a time when he had been through some of his life's biggest disappointments himself. And so you never know what you're being prepared for, and you never know what the string of disappointments that you think have been your downfall are actually being preparing you for, and are actually the prelude to something breaking out that's beyond your comprehension. What the enemy has consistently tried to do with all of us is he's wanted to break you down and convince you that your destiny is not happening. It's kaput. It's over. It ain't ever going to play out. It's always going to be. So, in this whole grand disorientation and this lawless parade and everything we watched, what the enemy brought in and what he capitalized on was fear. And then he came in to destroy hope, right? To destroy hope in every possible way. But look what happened in the course of that 1 year. In the same year that Sean Foyt was doing Let Us Worship everywhere, right? We had The Chosen. I'm the Chosen evangelist, by the way, in case you want to know, right? My parents got saved watching The Chosen, so I'm a Chosen fan. And I'm okay with all the creative and things they do with it. It is the story between the red letters, and it is creative. So, and it does talk about everything that Jesus did, but it tells us a backstory that none of us know, and that's called creativity. And guess what? Jesus is into creativity. So, no, it's not like all the Bible movies where the only thing Jesus says is what's in the red letters. It's the in between the red letter story that's so fascinating. How many and it doesn't matter to me if they created the backstory, because what they're creating is a very plausible backstory. In other words, even if it didn't happen that way, it fuels the imagination to think that it could have been this. It could have looked like that. How many people actually know what Hebrew culture and Roman culture actually look like and how those two interfaced? The average believer doesn't really have a grasp on that one at all. I know I didn't. And so I knew in part, but and then what happens when God breathes on kurabashita, when God breathes on creativity, when he breathes on something that actually creates awakening in the culture and does something that creates awakening. Guys, The Chosen blew open a big freaking hole in the cosmos for other media to come in right behind it. It did things that were never done before. Crowdsource funded. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It led the way and pioneered the way for creatives to come out of Hollywood and do what they were created to do without being in the middle of that system to do it. I'm not saying people should never do anything in that system because part of it is we're infiltrating the system. I get it. But there's so much that needed to be created that needed to not be bound by the laws of mammon and by the whole things that govern that system. And so it needed to come out. It needed to do something different. It needed to be something that we haven't seen before. And and it was and it is and continues to be that. So I'm all for that because that's my passion. My passion is to create stuff that's going to shake the world because it creates awakening and it bypasses our defenses and it tells us the truth at a slant. It comes in this way and says something to us. Why does a movie make you cry? Why does a truth in a movie about somebody forgiving their brother make like totally wreck you? Because it comes around your defenses and hits your heart. That's what beauty and that's what art do. They bypass our defenses and come around and tell us the truth behind the wall of the defense in a way that we can hear it. That's what it does. It creates that. Like it just it blows past those things and it catches us unaware in the best possible way. So in that same year, you had the chosen who painted a picture for a generation of Jesus that was kind. Wow, imagine that. You know, they did a documentary that's inside the Chosen app with Gen Z. Overriding commentary was, we never knew Jesus was so kind. Yeah, ouch. So what kind of picture were they getting painted? So then you have Jesus Revolution giving us a picture of what it's like when God comes and does what only he can do, and when he does it in spite of us. There's so many things that God's about to do in spite of us that we can't control. It just is. And he's doing things for you personally and doing things in the world that nobody can touch. Okay. And so part of what is bringing the great ease that we're going to see, number one, is we function differently. We function from union with Jesus and we function as ones who carry it all, who have it all, and we have unlimited access. It's living in that realm and being in that realm that is the biggest shift between the ages, coming out of the age of hierarchy where the whole emphasis was fivefold ministry, and if you weren't part of the fivefold, I guess you were just garbage. And so and everything having to come from the head and trickle down, it's like, really? This is the manifest sons and daughters of God age. So what is revival going to look like here? I don't know. There may be fire hubs that, there might be things like we saw in Toronto and all of that, but part of me thinks not as much. When you have unlimited access to heaven, do you need a prophet to tell you something all the time? Not when you can go get it straight from heaven. You can have your own revelation. You can engage with third heaven revelation, and you can be having a now encounter and a now word that comes from that encounter that you can speak and release on the earth that you're going to actually watch happen. So, would I rather be in real time or future time or past time? I'd rather be in real time. And and again, if I consider myself prophetic, I love to prophesy to people. I don't think it's going to go away, but I don't think that's the primary emphasis. I think the primary emphasis is you have it all, you carry it all, and you have access to everything. So I've talked about that new circuit board that God is giving us that has things on it that we have never encountered before. So part of the shift is coming out of the system and coming out of the hierarchy and coming into this revelation of just knowing that we have our own access to heaven. We can have and engage with anything that we want as much as we will allow ourselves to do and engage, we can have. It changes everything because then it means that no matter everybody gets to play, it's not just the ones up front. Everybody gets to play. I used to hate this idea. Oh, you're just gonna be the next generation. Your ceiling is gonna be their floor. And it's like, really? So my existence is just to get you to where you're supposed to be and I don't get to play? Are you for real? No. We all get to play. We all get to engage. Look, the next 10 years are going to be the biggest 10 years of your entire life. You're going to see more happen. This is what happens when you move into accelerated time. When you're in an accelerated, rich time, right? How does God redeem time? How does God redeem time? He doesn't redeem it by giving you back the thing you lost exactly the way you got it. He redeems it by bringing you into something new that you've never had before and doing exceedingly abundantly beyond everything you could ever imagine, right? He redeems time by making it thick, rich time. How does a woman give birth to a baby and not forget the pain? Because what the joy is so big that she doesn't remember, it displaces it. How is God redeeming time and restoring to you and me what was lost? He's displacing it with real time revelation, and he's displacing it with real time engagement, and he's displacing it with things that happen. What would normally take a year are going to take a month. You see what I'm saying? That's what rich time, that's what it means to be accelerated. It means that much more is happening in a shorter span of time. And so, can you make these years richer and deeper and broader than any of the years that I've ever had before? Forget this late bloomer garbage and forget this thing that I'm coming into the game too late. No, no, I'm telling you, no. You're going to do more in the next 10 years than you've done in your entire life. That's what acceleration looks like. That's what this verse is about. Okay. Amos 9, the message. The Lord Almighty. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, this is about the plowman overtaking the reaper. We are in the biggest sowing. We are in this abundance of having been sown time where everything that's been sown in every previous age has been rolled forward into this glorious time of reaping. That's how you have a suddenly when the sowing equation is so much bigger than the reaping because the sowing has been a sowing that's been, I mean, it's been literally everything that's been sown from the beginning of the church age is being rolled into this glorious final act of the play, which I have no idea how long it is, doesn't matter. So, does it change how I live? So my point is, when everything that's been sown and you get to come in at 11:59 and you get paid the same and you walk into a season and a time for such a time as this that is the best time ever to be alive on the planet. Hurrabashit, then what could be better? You have no idea how profound it is that you're alive at this time because you've stepped into a window and a season of history that is going to be the most explosive and that we've ever seen. How do you get a multi-billion soul harvest? Because every one of the manifest sons and daughters of God is liberated to do the thing that they were created for. You're stepping into rich time, redeemed time, and what it means for you to be fully actualized in the kingdom, even if you haven't felt like you've been actualized in any other season of your life. Yes, it's like Joseph, it's like getting promoted, right? Yes, I looked at the school system as much as I loved kids. I loved kids. That's why I was there. I was a father. That's why I was there. But it was also prison. Joseph had favor in prison. I had favor in prison. But prison is still prison. And if you spent most of your years in a prison of sorts because you've been confined, what would it be like for you to not be confined? What's it going to be like for you to travel in crazy, miraculous stuff? What's it gonna be like for you to travel in, um explosive miracles, miracles we've never seen? What's it going to be like for you to be the sign, the wonder? What's it going to be like for you to walk in a time where there's unlimited power unleashed on the earth in and through the manifest sons and daughters of God who are walking signs and wonders everywhere they go? How much better is that than anything that's ever existed before? You were born for such a time as this. The only decision we all have to make is what we're going to do with it. That's the only decision. It's like Esther. You know, Mordecai said to her, "Look, girlfriend," Scott version, Jesus, the Lord is going to rescue the Jews one way or the other. How do you not know that for such a time as this you've been born? And if that's true, then choose wisely, because this is a holy moment. This is a kairos moment intersecting chronos, because what you do here is going to change everything. And so I remember reading that passage and I was like, I don't want anybody to get what was meant for me. I don't want anybody to take, I don't want anybody to do what I was created to do. I don't want anybody to take that from me. I don't want somebody to get something because I didn't do it. So I would be like, because what he was saying was deliverance is going to come one way or the other, whether you play or don't. The thing you have to decide is whether you're going to play. Once you say I'm going to play and I'm in, guess what? Boom, here's what's going to happen. Read this verse. I will restore David's fallen shelter. I will repair its broken walls and restore its ruins, and will rebuild it as it used to be. This is from Amos 9. So that they possess the remnant of Edom and all the nations that bear my name, declares the Lord, who will do these things. In the days that are coming, I love the way it says it in this version. Make sure I'm in the right version. Is this the message? Okay. Um, Days are coming, declares the Lord, when the reaper will be overtaken by the plowman. No, it's not. I just realized it's not. I got to hit enter. Boom. Because I want my fun version here. Okay. Aha. Okay, here it is. That's okay. Yes, indeed. It won't be long now. God's decree. Things are going to happen so fast, your head will swim. One thing fast on the heels of the other. You won't be able to keep up. Everything will be happening at once. And everywhere you look, blessings. Blessings like wine pouring off the mountains and the hills. I will make everything right again for my people, Israel. They will rebuild their ruined cities. They will plant vineyards and drink good wine. Praise the Lord. They will work gardens and eat fresh vegetables, and I'll plant them on their own land. They'll never again be uprooted from the land I have given to them. God, your God, says so. I love that. That is what it means for the plowman. All right, let's do Jabez, shall we? Shandala Jabez. Okay, so before I do Jabez, I'm gonna say this. Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Yes, there's great disruption. Systems are shaking, the rhythms are breaking. The rhythms of the world are breaking and shaking. Okay? The rhythms and the patterns of the enemy and of the world are shaking. That's why you feel out of rhythm. Get it? why we feel out of sync. We feel out of rhythm because they're being blown to pieces. The rhythms of this world and all and the systems of this world and the patterns of this world are all being broken. So, yes, you feel out of sync when everything that's in this world is being shaken and literally just shook all to pieces in the best way. So, the Lord says, be still and know that I'm God. Hebrews 12 says, everything that can be shaken will be shaken. We're gonna shake it. There's a song on there somewhere. Dun, dun. So only what cannot be shaken will remain. That's what's remaining. The shaking and the stillness are not opposites, they're working together. That's what's so beautiful. How can you be anchored in stillness and rising in the shaking? Because you rise in the shaking because you are still before God. In our stillness before God, we will rise in the midst of all the shaking. Okay? Ooh. The shaking and stillness are not opposites, they're working together. God is shaking the noise out of you so you can know him more deeply in the quiet. He's shaking the noise out. Many of you feel like you're out of rhythm. The Lord's saying, I'm resetting your rhythms. The pace you've been living at cannot carry you into this next season. Some doors are closing, but it's not rejection, it's redirection. So that's one of the things to be looking at. The doors that are closing are not rejection, they're redirecting. You know, when you're in the when you're in sovereign times, sovereign places with sovereign people, then the shaking in the best possible way happens. When those things converge, it becomes explosive in the kingdom. There's favor being released. Heaven is naming you as chosen, even when the world has overlooked you. The shaking isn't punishment, it's preparation. God is creating space in all of the shaking, and the stillness that you're embracing in the middle of the shaking is creating space for new vision, for fresh clarity, and greater capacity. He's expanding our capacity through stillness and shaking simultaneously. And I heard this. I heard him say, move, it's too small. The tent you've been in cannot contain the increase. Don't fear the stretch, because in the stillness, he is enlarging you. In the stillness, in the middle of the shaking, you are being enlarged. So I decree over you that you will not be defined by the chaos around you. You are anchored in stillness, rising in the shaking. Your ears are turned to the whisper of the Spirit, not of the culture, not the noise of the culture. The shaking will not break you, it will launch you. And the space God is calling you into is bigger than you've ever imagined. So, Father, I thank you for everyone on this thing right now and anybody that listens that I speak peace over your mind. I silence every false rhythm, every false pattern, every counterfeit voice in Jesus' name. I ask that you would reset our steps to move with your heartbeat and let favor and clarity rise up in the middle of the shaking. Expand our capacity, open new doors, and anchor us so deeply in you that no storm can move us in Jesus' name. Now, I said I have to do Jabez, so let's do this. I'll end with this. Bless me indeed. Show me your glory today. This is day 2. By your nearness, your power, and your willingness to give. I want to be clean and fully surrendered before you to want what you want for your world and to step forward into your power and protection to see it happen. Enlarge my territory. Water your righteous What are your righteous borders, the territory you allotted with my name on it? What do you want done? Radically shift my spiritual expectations to conform to your will. I ask for your God sized best. Be with me. I'm praying faith size prayers. Your opportunities and assignments will outrun my ability and resources, or it's not you. So be very near. I am not sufficient or competent of myself to claim anything from myself, but my competence and sufficiency is from you and by your grace. Help me, surround me with your presence as a shield to protect me from Satan's deadly intents and vicious attacks. Keep my dependence on you keen and keep me from presumption, distraction, disunity, opposition, and oppression. You grant my petition in the court of heaven as I ask, seek, and knock in Jesus' name. Blessings. Thank you for waking up and sniffing a little coffee with me today. I enjoyed that. Um, let's play the tune. Right. So blessings. Like it, share it, all that neat stuff. And just know that you are rising in the shaking and you are creating, he is creating space for you and enlarging your tent. That in the middle of everything that is shaking, you're not breaking, you're being launched. And just know that in Jesus' name, that you are rising in the shaking and in the stillness, he's enlarging you. Amen. And boom.